What's going on, guys? Kyrie here. We're going to go over PvE and PvP tier list for the fairies month of June 2025. Let's get into it.
마지막 한 송이가 시들어간다. 하느끼는 최후의 기도 속에서 신은 최후의 선택을 내린다.
Alright, guys, first we're looking at PvE, and I want to reiterate a couple things of how I do these tier lists because I've got a lot of questions recently. So the rules for my tier lists is there can only be 3 of each type for each tier. So as you see, there can only be 3 holies in S tier is how I do it. 3 fire in S tier, and then down. It's not limited, like it doesn't have to be 3 like the next 3. For example, if you look at A tier, I only have 2 wind and 1 water. So it doesn't have to be 3 in each one, but it's limited to 3 in each one. Because I don't think, if you have 5 or 6 in S tier, is it really S tier? That's kind of how I'm looking at it. As well as they are ranked against themselves. So if we're talking about the 3 holies in us, I'm not saying that Gypsophilia is better than Chaltier and PvE. I am saying that Gypsophilia is the 3rd best PvE holy fairy. And then we go into fire, wind, water, earth. Other rules. This will be more important once we jump to PvP, and that's going to be the fairies aren't just they're good in non-fairy PvP top league, and then good or bad in fairy PvP. I give them all a 1 through 10 ranking for every single game mode. So PvE, all the PvE content. Some are better against long fights like Guild Boss, and some are better in short fights like the Mirror Trial that we currently have. So they're going to gauge based on that. There's more ones that you have to kill as fast as possible, like the Mirror Trial, and there's less of the long PvE fights, like Guild Boss. And when we talk about PvP, for example, one that is probably going to spark some discussion is Snakeberry, because Snakeberry doesn't work in top league. She got a 0 for top league, but she got a 10 for all other PvP game modes, whereas other fairies that are very good in PvP don't score as high as Snakeberry because they're averaging 7s and 8s, where she's 10 across the board and 1-0. I hope that makes sense. If you would like to see a list of the numbers that I use for these tier lists, let me know down below. And right now I just do it on hand scratch paper, but I can start putting them on the Discord for you guys. I've read them out before. Like, I've sat here with several pieces of paper and read off the numbers for every game mode, but people said the videos were going too long and it was boring. So let me know. Now, PvE. We have Snakeberry up at the top. She boosts herself, boosts whatever the next fairy is. Then we have Twin Lotus, bonus damage in PvE. Then we have Gypsophilia, primarily made for the longer fights, giving you the cooldown and the damage over time and a bunch of other buffs. But she can be set up to be used in some shorter fights. Fire, we have Winter Cherry, not so much for her herself, but whatever the boss's weakness is, you can add fire to it. Even if it doesn't have a weakness, you can sometimes, depending on the boss, add fire weakness. Then we have Chaltier. If they have a fire weakness, it increases the fire weakness and increases your damage per hit. So if you have multiple hit moves, it'll trigger each time. We have Hydreiga Flames. Hits really fast and the damage is way high, as well as her basic attacks enhance her cooldown, makes it come back faster. Tranquil Balloon Flower, not so much her damage herself, but what she allows you, the character, to do. Allows you to use skills in quick succession that you normally wouldn't be able to. Then we have Camellia SP. The tornadoes, it doesn't work on every boss, but on majority of the bosses, they will be immune to knock-up, and then it will just stack damage increase, so that's always great. Blue Rose, when you're at high HP, damage increase. Calamus, damage percent amp, as well as her actual damage herself is pretty high. Gardenia, water doesn't have many options for PvE, but Gardenia does have the passive for the attack increase. Then we have Snakeberry. Snakeberry does monstrous damage in PvE, but she really wants you to be on that one class as long as possible. That's her one downside. Anatheria SP does have the bonus earth damage and a quick ability. Then, for the first time in a long time, Tulip has been pushed down to A tier to make room for our newest Earth Season Fairy, Myrtle. And Hat Magic is just really, really great. Gives you base stat bonuses, and everyone in your AoE lowers their resistances. A tier, we have Milim. Gives you an attack buff, increases damage from your fairies. Urza, skill class damage even when she's on cooldown, and then a quick ability. Natsu, the reason why he's so much higher than Anatheria is the percentage, where he, I believe it's 70% HP, he can do the execute damage, and the execute damage is way higher. Ixoria and Chestnut, Scarlet Wish, Chestnut Rose, both give you that attack increase. Ixoria is higher very slightly. I believe it's only by 1 point, primarily because the skill is quicker, so over time it will end up being more damage. But that's just moving the points around. That's what we end up getting. Ainz, not so much here for the damage, but all the bad stuff he's putting on the PvE bosses, especially with some of the other win combos. Like right next to it, we have Balloon Flower, pull in, defense down, very, very powerful. Ikoria, the revive doesn't really matter in PvE, but the effects of her skill are very powerful. We have Tulip, Gamble, very, very strong. If we did 4, she would definitely be S tier. She's only hoed out of the S tier because Myrtle is now here. Then we have Birds of Paradise, primarily for PvP because of the stuns, but it hits so many times, and the flat damage is just so high that she is up here in A tier. What Incarnation, AoE only does 1 drag. It used to do multiple drags, but the damage is high and it stacks with a road, very, very powerful. Then we have not Licorice is down there. Laurel, his effect of being able to trigger his basic attack multiple times doesn't generally matter. It can once in a while, not really important, but it's just he follows, which doesn't really matter in PvE, but the amount of damage is high enough to be here in B tier. Then we have Sakura, defense down, and stun, which the stun generally doesn't matter in PvE, but the defense down does. Albedo. In some PvE scenarios, she could be very, very good, flipping debuffs into buffs for you, as well as the Jericho, very, very powerful. But in general, she's just going to be damage. Then we have Chestnut Rose giving you that damage amp for fire weakness. Anathria, execute, and healing reduction, which is why she's lower than Natsu and PvE. The heal reduction generally doesn't matter, except for in the Elemental Lord, where the Rose will heal. Almond Blossom, the dodge doesn't matter, but the other effects are powerful here. Hyacinth, his damage cannot be dodged, but the boss isn't really dodging, so you still get that cooldown reduction, which is powerful. Viola does the knockup, doesn't usually matter. Foxglove gives you that crit bonus with the passive Hinduism, as well as CC reduction if you're against a boss that actually does CCs. And then down here we have Daisy. The reflect damage is best. The taunt reflect damage is best in PvE, especially if you're trying to push up in things like Path of Fire, because the burn damage ignores their defense. Then we have Butterfly Orchid. Generally has high damage, but you're losing most of her effects because she's kind of built for PvP. Hibiscus, damage is way lower, but you're able to make use of that heal AoE damage more than you're able to with the shield AoE damage. Licorice, stuns, which doesn't generally matter, but it hits 6 times, and the actual damage after all 6 hits is decently high enough to be here in C tier at least. Rose, mainly here because it's burn damage and it's AoE over Diablo. Then we have Wendy. Doesn't really matter. She would be really good. She would be at least A tier if she gave bonus wind weakness damage. Lavender, we don't really have great water options, but this is it does deal damage, and then it does give you a damage amp until you break the sleep, but it is a damage amp still. These two, wherever one is, the other one should be right there as well. Pretty much the same ability, but different flavors. Then we have Marigold, which does give earth weakness damage, but it's very confused, right? Because it does the bonus earth weakness damage, but also does a slow. Part that's kind of built for PvP, part that's kind of built for PvE. So she's kind of confused. Then we have Mistletoe, doesn't really do much in PvE. The shield, whatnot, doesn't matter. There are some bosses where Rimuru can eat something and be made use of, but the ability is so slow and takes forever to go out, it doesn't really matter. Diablo, single target. Silence, the silence part doesn't matter, but his damage is higher than Dahlia, even though he is technically a lower star rarity, technically. We do next have Dahlia, kind of built to give you that HP steal rate, which doesn't really matter in PvE. Knockup, doesn't matter, just hits one spot, but is very high power, especially if you use Wind before her, with not Dahlia, Dandelion. Eldawise, that crit resistance doesn't generally matter in PvE, and stopping them from getting buffs with the poison doesn't generally matter in PvE. Candok is Candok, and Primrose is made for PvP. Now moving into PvP, make sure, we can see that just fine. So we have Urza at number 1, because her passive is able to be used in top league. Then we have Snakeberry for the same reason. She is so quick, and her boost can work on both directions. When you swap to the team with her, you can boost her and the next fairy if she's high enough stars, but you can swap from her to give the next fairy that bonus damage. Milim, the AoE is nice. She's very, very close to Snakeberry because it can be, her passive can be used in top league. And then they have kind of a similar thing where they both give boosts to the fairies. Milim has an edge by giving that attack increase and they cannot move. But Snakeberry's a lot faster and hits a lot harder. And immediately boosts herself and the next fairy. For fire, up at the top we have Hydreiga Flames, anti-dodge, big damage, and if for whatever reason you can't swap fairies, her basic attacks do lower her cooldown. Scarlet Wish, Chestnut Rose, attack increase, gives you that shield, very powerful. Then we have Winter Cherry. I'm surprised she's still here. Really, I value her rigidity passive very high, especially because everyone's doing fairy bombing. In top league, even though she does have the rigidity effect, I score her, I believe, at a 6 or a 7. I'd have to look at my notes. But I score her a little bit lower in top league just because there's no fairy bombing. But in game modes where there is fairy bombing, she is a last line of defense you definitely want to have as fire. And then the Wombo combo that has taken TLON by storm. Camellia SP with the tornadoes, which is scaled off your speed, which we have the if you wail on the movement thing from the mounts, she will scale off of that. It's only 25% of that if you're off mount, but it's still a bonus. Knock up, and then sets up for Ainz to come through with the kill, especially because we have a lot of Holy users, and Holy has a bunch of shields, and Ainz wrecks that. Then we have Almond Blossom. The dodge mechanic actually ends up being a counter to Ainz. Blue Rose, bonus damage when you're at high HP, reduce incoming damage when you're at low HP. Calamus. I was like Calamus? No, Calamus. Part of the one-shot combo. And then just stacking her mind, very powerful. Gardenia. The anti-heal thing doesn't generally matter, but she does have that swap to give you the Gladiator passive. Birds of Paradise, multiple stun chances. Myrtle, Hat Trick is just... Hat Trick and Gamble are pretty... It's funny because they're like so similar. They have like the checkered stuff. And like she does cards, she does chess. But their whole gimmicks are very, very close as well. But she buffs you and nerfs the enemy, buffs you. Butterfly Orchid ends up one-shotting people, and the way that she does it is because of the buff from Snakeberry. Not so much her damage herself. A Urza would do a very similar thing. Better in my opinion. But not everyone has Urza, right? But that shield is very powerful. That cannot move. You want to be interchanging your stuns and cannot moves because they have diminishing returns if you do them back to back. If you do a stun into a stun, that second stun is less. We don't have numbers on how much less, but it is less. But if you do a stun, then it cannot move, then a stun, everything works for as long as it's supposed to. Albedo, now that she's been fixed to work in top league, she is amazing. Then we have Laurel with his crazy tracking, high damage. Natsu with that high execute, at the 70% execute. Especially because Fierce Attack sometimes isn't enough to get them down to 60, but it's definitely enough to get them down to 70. And then Natsu comes through and tries to get that kill. Shaltair, really crazy bonus passive. She doesn't shield herself. Of course, it doesn't say that she does, but that is a downside of not being able to shield yourself. So only really good in group content, but is very good in group content. Anatheria, lower HP execute damage, but it does have that anti-heal. Ikoria has the anti-death mechanic. Tranquil Balloon Flower does do a knockup, which is powerful in PvP, as well as, even in top league or whatnot, allows you to do things that you generally can't do, such as double Soul Blast, double triple Tornado, things like this. Eldawise is an option. Generally, it ends up being these 4 for Wind, but Eldawise is an option because she does have that crit immunity percentage stat. She does have that poison that gets rid of their buffs and stops them from gaining buffs, and is just generally good. Then we have shield. If you have a shield, you get crit, so that's going to depend on your class. Kind of made for armorer. Then we have Anatheria, that's just not the fastest speed, but above average speed. Then we have Hibiscus. Her heal over time does work in things like top league, very powerful. Sakura. Sakura does the defense down and stun. You, as I said, you want to have a mix of stuns and cannot moves. Then we have another stun, but does a big AoE. Can get a one shot on a heal tank, but they could easily hold their Star Blessing. And if you're in this kind of go between where you're both holding there above, unless you're using swaps to get that HP steal rate bonus from Dahlia. Rose has the double silence. Camellia has a big AoE knockup. Balloon Flower can still be used, pull in defense down. Lavender, part of the one-shot water combo, which could be changing depending on Plumeria after testing. Primrose does do the stun. It is slow and gives you damage reduction. But I mean, we have a lot more damage increase now than damage reduction, bar wrong, right? Then we have Mistletoe in things like Shrine Peak or Guild War. Very, very great for locking off an area, because even if they try burning a dodge, it still does a stun. Then we have Gypso, also good in those same situations. You can lock down an area, especially you can do something like call Gypsophilia, hit a crystal tower, and then run around picking up the crystals yourself while stacking up the starlight. And then once you're at full stacks, then you can start an actual fight with someone. Diablo, single target silence, but a bit quicker. Exoria, attack increase, but her downside is the amount of HP she takes up. Ends up putting you in a bad situation. Hyacinth cannot be dodged, so that is very powerful in PvP and cooldown reduction. But his damage has fallen off, so he's down here. These two always together. Defense ups. One does a pull, one does a stun. Just pretty much the same thing, but different flavors. Snapdragon does one of the highest damages in the game, but has to do it based off of auto attacks. That takes a while. Daisy, the reflect, doesn't generally work too well in PvP. Rimuru does have some use cases depending on the enemy in PvP by being able to strip certain buffs. Actually, funny enough, very good against Milim specifically because of that attack buff, shield, stuff like that. And then you're able to rip them. And then if you time it right, you can do a 3 rip and get 6 buffs. But the buffs you're getting aren't the greatest. Made for PvE, made for PvE, made for PvE. Only hits one area. The knockup is good, but you have to stack your icicles, which doesn't really work well. The group heal is worse than an SR fairy. Well, the healing is worse than an SR fairy. Group heal is still technically the best, but whatever. The drag. So there is some use cases. I've seen some funny combos with things like Carnation and Carnation Myrtle or Carnation Birds of Paradise to just lock people in place and make them take all the erode damage from Carnation. But that could easily just be any other fairy. Then we have at the very bottom Marigold, slow ability, and all it does is a slow. Let me know what you guys think down below.